Adrian got the long straw, and he decided to go last. So we'll start with Mr. Hill, then go to Ms. Davis, and finish up with Congressman Smith. Each of you have 3 minutes.
All right. I got into this race because I'm gravely concerned about the future of our country. I'm not a person who exaggerates. I try to be very accurate. So it's not an overstatement to say gravely concerned. I'm concerned that 20 years from now, America looks very different than it is today, and not in a good way. That's not exactly a positive message. How do you put that and make it sound good? We're headed for the plan. The plan that's in place is for this country to go into bankruptcy. We cannot possibly meet the obligations that have been made by our government to our people. When you take into account that the government makes some rosy projections on economic growth, I think we're more likely to see the kind of economic growth we've seen in Japan the last 20 years. Japan used to be a powerhouse in the world. Back in the 80s, everybody was envied about Japan. Their stock market went up above 38,000. Well, today it's right around 9,000. Their economic growth for the last 20 years is averaged about 1%. They've been in and out of repeated recessions. Why did that all happen? They had a baby boom generation 20 years before ours. So we have huge challenges. To address that, how do we maximize our economic growth? We have to do big things. You can't just extend the Bush tax cuts. Okay, sure, I'll support that. But that's not just plan B, it's probably plan C or D. We need to vastly simplify our tax codes, streamline it. Same thing with regulation. I talk a lot about a flat tax. For the first time, I wrote about it in my book, for the first time I've actually seen where there was an article that Adrian mentioned a flat tax. It's not because it helps one group of people or another group of people, it's because it creates economic growth. And every percentage of economic growth generally equates to roughly 1 million jobs. A percent matters. All I'm asking the voters really is to get informed. Do you want money in politics? Do you want that to be how it's determined? Most elections, it's not about who's the best person, it's about who has the most money. It's a beauty contest. I would challenge anyone, read my book for 10 minutes. If you don't want to read anymore and you don't want to vote for me, you went far enough. But I'm one of those guys that, today if I weren't running but someone else was, I'd probably be real skeptical of somebody like me. I've always voted Republican. It got pretty easy. You walk in, you vote Republican. I would have looked at a third party or an independent candidate and said, oh, probably doesn't have good qualifications. Or is probably some kind of an extremist, got some really crazy views. I might have gone this far into the election and never taken a look at a guy like me. I think people take a look, and I'll actually win the election pretty handily. So I'll close it with that. Keep your mind open. Please take a look. And I think that people are going to be surprised on November 2nd.
Rebekah?
I can tell you the day I decided to get into this race. And that was the day that Congress voted on the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, a bill that had bipartisan support, a bill that would allow women access to our legal system longer than 90 days if they realized that they were not receiving equal pay for equal work. Like I said, a bill that had bipartisan support. I was devastated when my member of Congress, the incumbent, voted against it. But what enraged me was his justification for it. When he said in a press release that it would, quote unquote, unleash a flood of frivolous lawsuits. Well, I'm a woman in the working world, and quite frankly, I don't think pay equality, or even just the legal pursuit of it, is frivolous. And so that is why, despite the fact that as a hospital chaplain, I love my work and didn't intend to leave it, that is another reason why I jumped into this race, because I recognize that it is not just the letter that follows your name that ultimately matters. It is not just the letter after your name that ultimately decides whether or not you will be an effective member of Congress. It is your temperament and your discernment as a member of Congress that plays a large part. I recognize full well it's been a while since a Democrat last held this seat. Since 1935, the seat has only been held for one term by a Democrat. But I have never been as hopeful as I am now that we just might have a reverse Scott Brown style upset here in the 3rd District. And I think one reason why that is so telling and so very possible is because the incumbent faced not only a challenger in the primary, He's facing 2 challengers now. This is the first time in the history of the 3rd District that there have been 3 candidates to run in the general election. And that is why I think voters will get out in force on November 2nd. And that's why voters are not simply going to go by what letter follows each of our names. The reality is there are good Republicans just like there are good Democrats. And in fairness, there are some bad Republicans just like there are some bad Democrats. What we need is to recognize the merits of what each candidate brings to this race. In my work as a chaplain, I work with everyone. That's a large part of why I went into chaplaincy. I'm proud of the fact that with my work, I work with people who run the gamut of society. And I know as a member of Congress that I would take that with me if elected. I know that being able to actually care about your constituents, regardless of their party of affiliation, is a key part of this. And as someone born and raised in this state, I know full well we can have good people on both sides of the aisle. What matters is what they do when they get there and their effectiveness once elected.
Congressman Smith.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I am honored and humbled having had the opportunity over the last nearly 4 years to represent Nebraska, the 3rd District of Nebraska in Washington. It has been a responsibility that I've taken so seriously that that's why I come back from Washington so often, to engage folks where they are. I can't expect to have folks just with the money to come to Washington just to hear from them. That's why I enjoy and find it to be very productive to go out to the farms, ranches, small businesses, manufacturing plants across Nebraska. You know where I stand. You know my record. And I'm grateful that we have a system where we can pack the house today, where we can have a dialogue. We might disagree. Of course, my opponents have said they agree with me on a few things. Now, but let's look further, though. You know, we have participation government, where individuals can come together. And I'm grateful to have the support of some NRA members who have pooled their money to send a check, or Farm Bureau, other groups of individuals who come together to get involved. I have been motivated into public service because of the direction of our country, but if there's one person responsible, it's my grandfather, a World War II Navy Seabee. He's been gone since 1996. He was a Democrat. He viewed every Republican in office as out to take away his pension. Now, I don't think that was entirely accurate, or his thoughts, but he had me liking Jimmy Carter until this guy, Ronald Reagan, came along. I asked my parents, what's the difference? I was in 4th grade. And I've been a Ronald Reagan fan ever since. But my grandfather, that Democrat that he was, motivated me into public service more than any other one individual. So ironically, if you like the way I vote, you can actually thank a Democrat. If you don't like the way I vote, you can blame a Democrat. But, as was mentioned earlier, my grandfather, even though he differed in some views, we agreed on a lot of things. We could have a vigorous debate and still love each other. We could have a civilized discourse. And here we are, participating in government, representative form of government, this thing we call a democratic republic, where we want more people involved. And that's why I'm glad we're hearing this cycle that more people are involved and getting involved in ways they never have before. I'm glad to have so many of their support, and I just ask for your vote come November 2nd. Thank you very much.
And that will conclude the Western Nebraska Taxpayers Association-sponsored 3rd District Congressional Forum. Thanks for listening.